Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. I'm going to give a quick overview on who Charles Taylor is, because I suspect if I asked by show of hands for people to say they've heard of Charles Taylor, the room would look pretty much the same way it looks right now. So I will give you a little quick overview on who we are, and then in the theme of breaking the mold, talking about one of the more innovative aspects of what we're doing around the world of technology, and I'll come to that as well. Very brief overview on at least who we are. We are probably the leading provider of professional services into the insurance market on a global basis. So we're in a niche, i.e. insurance, but it's a big niche because we do it on a global basis. And we are typically B2B, i.e. we're serving either the insurers, we're serving the brokers, we might be serving the insureds, but then typically they're large and commercial. And to the extent, in cases where we serve consumers, it's almost in a B2B to C basis, i.e. where we're providing it as a service to one of those parties for them to provide services to their clients. We've been around a fair while. 1840, the company started, in fact, as a coal merchant up in Newcastle, and then shifted focus in about 1884 to focus on the insurance sector, which must sound mad, but it is the nature of life. And since then, we've built the business up from being a small partnership at that time to about 1,800 people. In fact, over the last 5 years, we've pretty much doubled the size of the group. We clearly, bless you, we have a dispersal of people across numerous offices, so around 70 offices in around 30 countries around the world, of which about half are in the UK, but the remainder of the offices range right throughout Asia, starting in Beijing all the way down to Australia, in Sydney, Perth and such like, various parts of the Middle East, all over the UK, bits and pieces around Europe, and then throughout the Americas, going from Canada all the way down, in fact, to Peru. And revenues around 165 million. That's the analyst forecast for 2016. And our version of the Net Promoter Score that Gervais was talking about, we do a survey among our staff, which is done by a third-party organization where they asked to do exactly as he described in terms of customers. We do similar exercises with customers as well. And we ask our staff to rate from 1 to 10 exactly the way he described. And 9 out of our 10 staff rate the company either a 9 or a 10 as a great place to work that they'd recommend to family and friends. Now, what is interesting is there's a lot of research that shows that if the staff think it's a great place to work, they are much more compelling when they go out in to speak to clients, and particularly in a professional services environment where the client interaction is all about having the right people with the right relationships and enthusiastic and excited about what they do. And as I said, we are dedicated on insurance. I took over in 2011. We've spent a fair amount of time, actually the first couple of years it was really a case of what I politely called reinforce the foundations. There was a lot to sort out. It was a business which had been around, as you could hear, a very long time. But if you like, it had got a bit stale. And the first year or two, we reinforced the foundations. We sorted out a lot of fundamental issues in the group, everything from just making sure the cash was flowing, making sure the bank arrangements were in place, getting the audit fees down, getting just basic stuff right. And then we spent the next couple of years building out the core services we had. The business itself had a phenomenal range of clients going across all the sectors I've just talked about. And the real opportunity there was to look for ways to grow the business in those core markets. And then in fact, over the last year or two, what we've been doing is creating what we see as significant initiatives that have the potential to step change the size of the business. So in our minds, they're our bigger bets. But they're bets, and I'll talk a little bit about one in particular, which is the insurance, is the technology-related bet, and hence linked to breaking the mold. This is a chart that's intended for you not to read, but visually it's a little bit easier to read if you're actually looking at it in your book. But what it was even for ourselves, we put down a list of, if you like, new products, new services, new offices, new acquisitions we had done. And it sort of was to give a sense that this was not an organization that was standing still. It was an organization which were launching loads of new products, loads of new services, expanding ourselves out geographically as well. So more for visual effect than the specifics, but I will go into a few of the specifics now. So in terms of what we terming, if you like, our strategic, the sort of step change initiatives we've initiated over the last couple of years. And they were building, if you like, on the platform that we had built over the years before that. The first is InsurTech. And that one I'm going to do a deep dive in, so I won't talk too much about it now. The second was something called an acquisition we in fact did, a company called Seeger. Again, if you've never heard of Charles Taylor, you're even less likely to have heard of Seeger. Seeger does medical assistance and travel claims management. The irony is, and I don't wish this on any of you, but the chances are you may have actually used Seeger, because Seeger handles for a large number of the largest insurers in the UK and in fact wider. It handles all the travel claims. So if you had a slightly unfortunate incident on the slopes, or you were in the States and something dreadful happened or something like that, you thought you were contacting either your bank or your insurer, and in fact who you were contacting was Seeger, because they are handling that on behalf of, as I said, pretty substantial portion of the UK market and beyond. And they would have handled everything from dealing with your medical thing, airlifting you if you needed to be, ensuring all the payments happened. And as I said, we bought that business pretty recently. We bought that business, it itself was growing at a pretty good rate. But what we really liked about it is that it played directly into the markets and the segments that we are successful in. And that was all about looking for joint marketing. So one of their big growth areas, for example, is offering their services to large marine and energy companies globally. One of our largest clients, actually, we have relationships with 25% of the marine and energy market globally. So we had the ability to bring introductions into Seeger, into a market that they previously had only touched on, if you like. So there are a lot of synergies, big initiative for us, as I said, not one I'm going to focus on in this discussion. Next area related, TPA, for those who aren't familiar, that's third-party administration or BPO, business processing outsourcing, but again, specializing within the insurance market. We already provide the service on a global basis, but what we did realize is that there's been a shift, and I'll talk about some of the trends in technology, but actually they apply equally in the TPA market, where people are trending towards a sort of safe pair of hands where they can trust that they will deliver the service in the way they are expecting. And there are an awful lot of organizations who do this in a sort of hobby sort of way, or they do it in a way that it's all about just low cost, low quality service. I listened to Gervais. We are exactly on the other end of the spectrum. We are all about the service, getting it right. And that's a big market, big area for growth. And we have been in that space, been pretty successful in growing out that market by marketing it to our existing client base, which are global insurers who need and use these services. And then the last one, which I'll touch on briefly, if you're familiar with the Lloyd's market, you'll obviously be aware of the companies like Beazley and Hiscox and such like. All of those companies will have started at some point in time as a small syndicate. And in that context, we set up something which is called a turnkey managing agency, which helps or insurers who want to enter the Lloyd's market. We help them set up that syndicate and provide that as a service, as a back office service on an end-to-end basis. And again, that's one of our bigger initiatives. Within the Lloyd's market, we were the first time they've allowed someone, I think in about a decade, to set something up like that. It's a very tight market to get into, and it's a business that we think will be attractive too. But as I said, I was just going to give you a flavor for these are some of the bigger initiatives. You saw on the previous page there are a host of other stuff. There were some stories I could tell listening to Gervais' story about companies taking advantage of other companies in having tougher times right now. A number of our businesses, we're in a people business. Some of our competitors are having some pretty rough times. It's giving us a real opportunity to pick up individuals and teams in a way that's quite fantastic. But that's more part of our core businesses that we're growing. What I did want to talk about, and particularly to the theme of breaking the mold, was all around the InsurTech opportunity. Now, as I mentioned, we're now at about 1,800 people. But within that, we actually do an awful lot of technology services. And a couple of years ago, we started to look at this market and say, actually, this is worth us investing more in it. A little bit of a flavor of the size of the insurance technology market. Clearly, by the size of the figures, it's huge. Clearly, relative to us, it's even bigger. These are big markets, 145 billion in global insurance technology, a lot of money being spent on services, on technology, software itself, and a market that is actually growing. And I'll talk a little bit about why it's growing, some of the bigger trends at the moment. What's happened in the insurance market is you've had a variety of factors which are playing out. And when I say the insurance market, I'm talking about both the sort of traditional domestic markets that you'll think about, the motor and home players, but also in the specialty markets, which is i.e. for the larger, more commercial end, and those are global markets. And some of the big trends that are happening is, and you'll probably be reading about it, you may be reading about it in the press, but obviously the world of fintech, which has become very trendy, which has been more targeted towards banks and payments and whatnot. At some point in time, someone woke up and realized, hang on, there's something called insurance, and insurance is equally attackable, if you like, by using technology in a new way, an innovative way. And what's happened is a number of the sort of traditional incumbents who were used to sort of a once a year send something by post to their client base, and now they feel trendy because at least they now email it. They've suddenly realized that world is not working so well. And if you've ever been inside an insurer, and I've been into a fair number of them, and you'll understand now why when you ask them and they say, don't you realize I'm a client of yours for this and this and this, they have absolutely no idea. None of their systems talk to each other. It's typically very hard to get the aggregated data. They have no idea about anything more. Even the information you probably inserted when you did your form, 90% of it never made it actually onto a system. They are not well positioned for that. And what they've all done is they've woken up in the last couple of years to say, actually, there are other players coming into the market that will eat our lunch if we don't do so. So as part of doing that, they've needed to say, how do I use technology and some of the emerging technologies in a way that will enable me to take advantage of my large client base, my great reputation, and translate that into new business, and rather than someone else getting it. So that's been a big driver as well. The second big driver, and this has been a financial services, probably more generally, but if any sector that's being hammered on in terms of regulatory change, it would be financial services, and within that, insurance had certainly got its fair share. So there is barely a day, and we run a number of insurance companies as a service. We are involved in a whole variety of them. There is no day that there isn't a change in the regulatory environment, a new set of requirements, everything from treating customers fairly, and the shift has gone from just tell us you're doing the right thing to prove to us you're doing the right thing. And unfortunately, to prove to someone that you've done the right thing with every single customer requires you to have systems that can provide that information to you effortlessly, because if not, it's actually an impossible task. So to meet that regulatory and compliance burden, insurers are looking for new ways to get access to that, to use technology to enable them to do so. The other thing, people talk about banks. I don't know if you will have read in the press about a number of the big banks, and they would say, oh, they're on old technology and they were unable to make payments over the last couple of years. It was clearly in the headlines. And they talked about mainframe systems and old systems. If you go into the insurers, the systems get typically even older because they've had to handle policies that are multi-year, typically decades, if not longer, policies, and they've had to have the systems in place to do that. And the challenge for these guys is, how do you move from where you are to that new world and replace it? And in fact, a lot of those systems are out of support, so they've got to do something. And then the world is just still, although right now, clearly politically, there's a contrasting trend to this, but the world, there is certainly more competition on a global basis, and particularly when you get into the more specialty ends of insurance. It's no longer just a London market with a bit of something happening in Bermuda. Singapore, Shanghai, all of those markets are becoming pretty sizable insurance markets and creating quite an intense competitive environment for insurers. So that, if you like, is the context of what's happening out there in the insurance technology space. And within that space, we took a view that there was an opportunity for us to bring together our insurance expertise with our 1,800 people dedicated to doing insurance, running insurers, providing a whole host of services. And then combined with that, we had 200 people who were dedicated technology specialists used to providing solutions for insurance companies in a variety of form. And we thought if we could pull that together, we could we could do something actually that clients would find attractive. We already did have a certain number of technology clients we were providing technology services to, but we made a call that it was worth upping the bet, given the information I've just provided. So as I said, we had a lot of the capabilities. We had people providing those services both for existing clients as part of a wider service or as part of technology. We actually had a number of solutions already in place. We had we had everything from document management systems, workflow systems specifically designed for insurers with clients in place. We had launched a couple of years before a claims system for people in the London market, which again had quite a lot of take-up. But typically our approach until about a year or two ago was quite a reactive approach. It was almost, in fact, for quite a number of these, it was actually clients coming to us and saying, could you provide this system? And we'd actually go off and try help them and develop the system for them, rather than us taking a proactive approach and saying, how can we build ourselves in the space? And as I said, so we made the conscious choice to change that about 2 years ago, and as part of that, we effectively changed our entire management team of our technology business. So we brought in a set of experts, both from people who had been doing implementations in other sectors. So insurance is not typically seen as the leading space for technology. We brought in people who had experience at working on technology implementations in sectors that had been more progressive. We obviously brought in our existing technology people, and we also did put in place a number of partnerships, which I'll talk a bit about as well. So as I said, the senior management team discussed, we started to build out an outwards focused sales team. As I said, we had been more reactive in the past, and because we actually have within that insurance space, we are remarkably well known with a great reputation. It meant that actually once we said we were out there, we're going to be selling, we were able to hire typically the senior salespeople of a number of the people who did play in the space, saw us as a good home to come to. We secured a number of partnerships, which I'll talk a little bit about. And we bought, which was for us a very significant item, we bought alongside a private equity firm called Riverside. We took a substantial stake in a software company called Fidata. The company itself does end-to-end software for insurers, so it's a policy administration system for life, P&C, and health. And the software itself is rated by companies called Gartner and Celent, who are the premier rating companies who rate software which CIOs use when they're making their decisions. They rate the software as number one in the world. So it's in its space, which as you could see from my earlier pages, it's a big space, that insurance software space. These guys have got the kit that is rated by third-party independent experts as top software. And it had been implemented in various parts around the world. Now, how did we, as our company, buy almost a 30% stake in a software company along the lines I described? The reality was the company was a Bulgarian software company, and its implementations were by and large in developing markets. And because it was a Bulgarian company, bluntly, and because this is someone's core technology, they generally weren't getting as much success in the developed markets by insurers in developed markets. So developing market insurers were saying, this is the best software and I can afford it. Developed market companies would say, that's from Bulgaria, I don't care how good the software is, that's not where I'm going to buy my software from. And so us, together with Riverside, which in themselves are one of the larger technology-orientated private equity firms, we bought the company and were able to then bring in a senior management team, clearly based here, as part of a redomestication of the business. And we're in the process now, if you're like, of going out there and promoting the software and the system as well. And they clearly are a partner of ours. And then we launched a number of core propositions which we had gone out and actually developed, which are absolutely based on our experience of the space, where the need is among insurers and brokers. Very high level, some of the core products, this will be, almost runs the risk of being gobbledygook if you're not in the space. But the first one is clear, it's the one I've just been talking about. Policy administration is your core system. The next system is for broking. I'm talking about broking here, that's the Aons, the Marshes of the Willises of the world. But the smaller brokers, they all use core systems. We have a system in place. And then delegated authority is a remarkably quirky world of insurance. They are almost sort of small insurers of sort, and they need a specific type of software. And the key for them as well is software that links them into the insurers. Now you might think, well, that's quirky. I'm sure that there's very little of that. If you take the Lloyd's market, which you will be familiar with, I suspect, about 40% of the business that goes into the Lloyd's market comes through delegated authorities. So you think of Lloyd's as a big, dealing all the biggest, most largest complex business, but actually about 40% of it comes that way. But if you went to the RSAs of the world, it's actually very similar percentages. So this is a big market within the world of software for insurers. And then we have a host of other software solutions from document management, workflow, and such like. Some of those we own, some of those we license, and some of those we promote, but all of those we effectively implement for clients. When I talked about partners, it ranges from Fidata, who I've obviously already spoken about, but clearly groups like Oracle, Microsoft, Cognizant have all looked to partners. And you could think, why would companies of that size think we're an interesting partner? Equinix, you may or may not be familiar, they're one of the largest data storage companies, and Activeo is a very niche product used by technology IT teams to facilitate production. The reason these sort of companies are interested in partnering with us and have put in place, explicitly named us platinum partners, so for example, Oracle put us as a platinum partner. The other list on the list of platinum partners are groups like PwC, Ernst & Young, and such like. So organizations clearly a multiple of our size. And the reason Oracle were interested in us in that capacity is one is Fidata, which is what they see as a very important growth area in insurance, is based on Oracle. So they see it as an opportunity to promote their services through that. But secondly, because actually groups like Oracle and Microsoft haven't had the traction in insurance as much as they would have liked. And they see us as a credible way of getting into those markets. And similarly, Cognizant as well. So these are the sort of partners we've put in place to work alongside us. Clearly key to doing it. A few examples of successes, just so you get a flavor of what am I saying when I'm saying what are we trying to do. The first is a company you'll never have heard of, I suspect, called La Positiva. It's actually one of the largest Peruvian insurers, and they went through a process looking for new policy administration system. They originally looked at Fidata and concluded they loved the software but couldn't see how they would support them in Latin America. Once we did the deal and we were part of it, it got them to cross the line. And the reason they crossed the line is, one is they knew Charles Taylor. We have an operation in Peru. We have an operation in Colombia. We have an operation in Mexico City. We have an operation in Brazil. And they use us in other areas of our business. So suddenly they went from saying, I'm not going to use some Bulgarian software company, to saying, well, these guys I know, they're people I trust. I know they'll deliver the right job. So we won that. It's quite a substantial implementation we're doing. We then set up a center of excellence in Mexico City. We have now about 15, 20 people doing software implementation now down in Latin America, and we're bidding for quite a number of other contracts. We did rather cheekily hire the head of sales for the largest regional player, software player in Latin America as well, who came across because he thinks this will be the winning proposition. And then just an example of, again, a broker called Assured Partners, probably, again, one you might not have come across because in London they're specialist, but actually they're the 13th largest US broker, and this was their London operation, moving on to software that we had implemented by us. So those are the types of business we're looking to grow. As I said, this is one portion of our wider Charles Taylor group, but it did at least fit the theme of breaking the mold, and I thought it would be interesting for people to hear the story. But I could have talked about all the others with as much enthusiasm as well. So the other part of what's been quite interesting and very brief, not only has InsurTech been helpful in its own marketing services, it's actually become part of our proposition for clients as well. They're a very large, without being too specific, a very large Middle Eastern sporting event that's meant to occur in a couple of years' time. Building a lot of stadiums, etc. You need to have, as part of that, things go wrong. They needed to appoint a chief adjuster. One of our areas of our business, when I didn't talk too much of the core businesses, is we do technical loss adjusting. Something goes wrong in the world, we deal with it. They were looking to appoint adjusters, and when it came to it, we offered them a proposition which was a combination of our adjusting expertise plus a technological solution that enabled them to understand their portfolio of claims, and they pointed us as the lead in preference specifically because of that. So not only is the InsurTech helping in its own right, it's actually supporting some of our other businesses to create a more distinctive proposition for clients. I mean, the reality is clients are looking for technical expertise, but people are more and more looking for it to be delivered in a more innovative, technologically supported way. The story I've really been telling, we think we're well positioned for growth. Obviously, the size of the prize, or the pie, if you like, is absolutely enormous. We're not under any delusion that we're going to somehow pick that, get a large share of it, but we only need a tiny, tiny fraction of that for a group of our size for it to be a massive step change in the business. So hence why this is one of our core initiatives. That's it.